They said the cabin in Holt's Hollow was cursed, that no man who stayed there lasted more than a night. But when retired officer Liam Harper bought it for $800, he didn't believe in curses, only in silence, solitude, and second chances. What he didn't know was that silence in the hollow wasn't peace. It was warning. His only companion, Ranger, a retired police dog with storm gray fur and eyes like embers, seemed to sense it first. The first night, he refused to sleep. He barked, clawed, and stared at the old stone fireplace as if something behind it was breathing. By morning, the storm had trapped them both. And what Liam found hidden beneath that stone would uncover not just a murder, but the truth about the ghosts that never rest. The kind born not of death, but of conscience. Rain drummed softly against the high windows of the Shelby County Courthouse, turning the late afternoon light to a dull, pewter haze. The old building, with its creaking wooden floors and fading portraits of forgotten judges, smelled faintly of wet coats and coffee gone stale. The kind of place where time itself seemed to linger, cautious, heavy, reluctant to move forward. Liam Harper sat near the back of the room, shoulders straight, hands clasped loosely in his lap. His posture was that of a man who'd spent a lifetime in command of himself. But the stillness wasn't peace. It was armor. The years since his retirement from the police force had done little to quiet the ghosts that followed him. There were nights he still woke to the echo of a gunshot that had taken his partner's life, and the sound of his own voice shouting a name that the darkness swallowed whole. Ranger lay at his feet, the great silver-coated German shepherd silent and watchful. His fur shimmered faintly under the pale courthouse light, a rare blend of steel gray and cream, like a living shadow of snow and moonlight. His amber eyes flicked occasionally toward Liam's hand, reading every slight movement. They had learned each other's rhythms long ago, through chaos, through blood, through loss. At the front, a portly man in a brown suit cleared his throat and tapped the microphone. "All right, folks, let's continue. Lot number 16, Parcel 7B on County Ledger, the old Holt property out in the hollow." A murmur rippled through the room. The sound wasn't loud, but it carried a certain weight, a hesitation that shifted the air. Liam felt it instantly. Heads turned slightly. People exchanged glances that were half pity, half curiosity. Somewhere near the front, a woman whispered under her breath, "That's Holt's Hollow, the haunted land." The auctioneer adjusted his glasses, voice flattening as though even he preferred to rush this part. Abandoned structure, condition poor, single well, untested. 160 acres of wilderness, mostly overgrown. Opening bid, $800. The silence that followed wasn't the kind of quiet that welcomed thought. It was the kind that smothered it. No one raised a hand. The rain's rhythm became the only sound in the room, steady, insistent. Liam lifted his arm. The motion was deliberate, unhurried. 800. The auctioneer's head jerked up, eyes narrowing slightly as if to confirm he'd heard right. 800 from the gentleman in the back. He looked around, perhaps expecting a counterbid. None came. The farmers, the land brokers, even the curious locals who filled the benches, they all kept their eyes down. Ranger shifted slightly, one paw pressing against Liam's boot. The gesture felt like a question. The auctioneer sighed. 800 once, twice. His gavel came down with a crack that sounded far louder than it should have in the cramped space. "Sold to Mr. Harper," Liam said quietly. His voice carried, calm and even. Liam Harper. The sound of his name seemed to draw attention like static. Someone near the door muttered, "That ex-cop from Birmingham?" Another added, "Thought he'd left all that mess behind." Liam ignored them. He rose, smoothing the front of his worn jacket. His clothes were plain: denim shirt, sturdy boots, a weathered leather coat that had seen more than one winter storm. Everything about him spoke of simplicity, except the eyes. Pale blue, steady, edged with a fatigue that came from watching too much of what most people spend their lives trying to forget. He moved toward the front to sign the papers, and the whispering followed him like a cold draft. Words like curse and disappearance threaded through the air. A few phrases caught his ear. 15 years, never found the body. His dog howled for 3 days straight. The clerk handling the sale, a young woman with trembling hands and dark circles under her eyes, barely looked at him. She pushed the papers forward, her tone mechanical. "Sign here, Mr. Harper. The deed will be recorded by the end of the week." Liam signed without comment. His penmanship was clean, almost military in its precision. The moment his signature touched the page, the clerk pulled the folder back quickly, as if afraid of keeping it too long. He turned, feeling the weight of every gaze in the room pressing against his back. The auctioneer offered a weak smile. "Congratulations, sir. Hope you like solitude." "Been looking for it a long time," Liam replied. The rain had eased when he stepped outside, leaving behind a thin mist that curled along the courthouse steps. The small town spread out before him. Low brick buildings, a faded diner sign, the courthouse clock ticking louder than it should. The world here moved slow, like a place that had learned to live with its secrets. Ranger trotted beside him, nails clicking lightly against the wet pavement. The dog's head turned once toward the courthouse doors, ears pricking briefly before settling again. He felt it too, that subtle shift in the air that always follows when something unseen stirs beneath the surface of ordinary life. Liam paused at the edge of the street, letting the mist cool his face. He looked down at Ranger, and for the first time in months, a small, almost invisible smile touched his lips. "Well, partner," he murmured, "looks like we've got ourselves a new start." The shepherd blinked slowly, as though weighing the truth of that statement. His tail gave a single, deliberate wag. They walked toward the truck, parked beneath an old magnolia tree. The leaves dripped steadily, each drop falling with a hollow sound against the hood. Liam opened the passenger door, and Ranger jumped in, landing with a soft thud before settling upright, always watchful, always facing forward. As Liam climbed in behind the wheel, a flicker of movement caught his eye. Across the street, behind the glass of the cafe. 2 men stood near the counter, their heads turned slightly toward him. One of them, an older man with a gray Stetson, met his gaze for a heartbeat too long before looking away. Liam started the engine. The hum of the motor blended with the rain. He told himself it was small-town curiosity, but deep down, an old instinct stirred, the same one that used to wake him seconds before danger arrived. He glanced once more at the courthouse behind him. Through the rain-streaked window, he could still send the empty benches where people had sat, whispering about ghosts and curses. He had faced men who lied, bled, and begged for mercy, but never superstition. And yet, as he drove past the sign that marked the edge of town, he couldn't shake the feeling that this place didn't want to be disturbed. The road ahead curved toward the distant line of hills, pale and hidden beneath mist. Ranger leaned his head out the window, ears twitching as the wind carried the scent of pine, earth, and something else, something faintly metallic, like the breath before a storm. Liam tightened his grip on the wheel, the paper deed resting in the glove box beside him. He didn't believe in ghosts, but the land he had just bought, it felt like it did. And somewhere deep inside he already knew, some silences are not empty. They're just waiting for someone brave, or foolish, enough to listen. The bell above the wooden door gave a tired ring as Liam Harper stepped into Abernathy's general store. The smell hit him first: sawdust, leather, and something warm that lingered from a pot of coffee left too long on the burner. It was the kind of scent that spoke of 100 ordinary days in a small town that tried hard to forget extraordinary things. The store was old. Shelves bowed slightly under the weight of decades. The floorboards groaned like they remembered every footstep that had crossed them. Sunlight slanted through the front windows, catching dust motes that drifted in the still air. Behind the counter stood an elderly man, with kind eyes and a face carved by time. His apron bore the stitched name Abernathy in faded red thread. He looked up as the bell rang, his brows lifting slightly when he saw the stranger. Tall, broad-shouldered, his jacket damp from the lingering rain, a silver-gray German shepherd padding silently at his side. "Well now," the old man said, setting down the rag he'd been using to polish the counter. "Afternoon, stranger. You're not from around here." Liam gave a polite nod. "Just passing through. Needed a few supplies." Abernathy's eyes softened as they dropped to the dog. "That's a fine shepherd you got there. Looks like he's seen some miles." "He has," Liam replied. "So have I." He took a folded list from his pocket. Simple things: lamp oil, coffee, nails, a spare axe handle. The old man began moving around the shop with a slow but steady rhythm, filling each request with practiced ease. "So," Abernathy said casually as he reached for a tin of coffee beans, "you the fella who bought the Holt place?" Liam paused mid-step. "News travels fast. In a town like this?" The old man chuckled softly. "News travels faster than good sense." Ranger sat near Liam's leg, ears pricked, amber eyes following the man's movements. The air had changed, subtly, almost imperceptibly, but enough that even the dog noticed. Abernathy returned to the counter, placing the supplies down neatly. "Can't say I'd have the stomach for that property myself." Liam met his gaze evenly. "And why's that?" The old man's expression wavered between caution and curiosity. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "Because that place has a story. And around here, stories have long shadows." He motioned for Liam to follow his eyes toward the far wall of the store. There, behind a rack of postcards, hung a faded black-and-white photograph in a simple wooden frame. A younger man stared back from the picture, rugged, confident, with a camera slung around his neck and a black shepherd sitting proudly beside him. The handwritten note beneath the photo read, "Ethan Holt, 2008. Reporter. Friend." Liam took a slow step closer. The photograph was old, its corners curling, but there was life in the man's eyes. The kind of spark that belonged to someone who believed in truth no matter the cost. "That him?" Liam asked quietly. Abernathy nodded. "Ethan Holt. Came here from out east. Said he was writing a piece on environmental law. Something about the mining companies buying up land in the valley. Smart man. Too smart for his own good, maybe." "What happened to him?" The old man's hands found the counter again, fingers tapping lightly, an old habit of people remembering things they wish they hadn't seen. "He asked too many questions," Abernathy said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Then one night, he just stopped existing." The words hung in the air like smoke that refused to fade. Liam's eyes flicked back to the photo. The black shepherd beside Holt seemed to stare through the years, eyes gleaming with a loyal vigilance that made Liam's chest tighten. Ranger shifted at his side, letting out a low, soft breath. Not a growl, but something deeper. Recognition, almost. "Folks say," Abernathy continued, "you can still hear his dog out there sometimes. When the wind blows through the hollow, it sounds like howling. Some call it superstition. Others just call it guilt." The store fell quiet again. A fly buzzed lazily against the window pane. Liam took his wallet from his jacket. "I don't put much stock in ghost stories, Mr. Abernathy." The old man gave a weary smile. "Most men who say that haven't met one yet." He began to bag the supplies, his movements slower now, thoughtful. "You remind me of him, you know. That look in your eyes, like you're already carrying more than any man should." Liam said nothing. He pulled a few bills from his wallet and placed them on the counter. Abernathy hesitated before reaching for them. "You served, didn't you? Long time ago. Then you know what it means when something follows you home." That line hit deeper than it should have. Liam didn't answer, didn't have to. The silence between them became a quiet understanding. Two men who had both seen ghosts in their own ways. Finally, Abernathy sighed, pushing the small paper bag toward him. "Take my advice, son. If the wind in those woods ever sounds like someone calling your name, don't answer." Liam's eyes met his. Steady, unreadable. "I'll keep that in mind." He turned to leave, but the old man spoke once more, his tone softer this time, almost fatherly. "You know, some ghosts don't haunt places, son." Liam stopped, one hand on the door. "They haunt conscience," Abernathy said quietly. "And they don't leave until the truth does." The words lingered, heavy and personal, as the bell over the door gave another weary ring. The afternoon had darkened to a dull blue-gray. Outside, the wind had picked up again, sweeping through the empty street with a long, mournful sigh that seemed to echo the old man's warning. Ranger stepped out first, tail low but posture alert, nose lifting toward the direction of the distant hills. Liam followed, the paper bag tucked under his arm. He paused on the wooden porch, glancing back through the store window one last time. Abernathy stood where he'd left him, staring absently at the photograph on the wall, the one of Ethan Holt and his dog, the frozen moment of two lives that had vanished into rumor. Liam turned toward his truck. The road leading north curved like a gray ribbon into the fading light, disappearing into the mist that clung to the tree line. He could almost feel the cabin out there waiting, quiet, patient, holding its breath. Ranger jumped into the truck bed, circling once before, settling down. The dog's gaze stayed fixed on the horizon. As Liam climbed into the cab, the wind gusted hard enough to rattle the windows of the store behind him. The sign that read Abernathy's General Store swung on its chains, groaning in protest. He started the engine, the hum steady beneath the whispering wind. Somewhere beyond the town's edge, the first flakes of snow began to fall. Soft, silent, deliberate. It was as if the sky itself was covering the world in secrecy. Liam tightened his grip on the steering wheel. The old man's words replayed in his mind. "Some ghosts don't haunt places. They haunt conscience." Ranger's ears flicked back, as though hearing the same echo. The truck rolled forward, the sound of gravel beneath its tires fading into the wind. The hollow awaited, and for the first time in years, Liam Harper felt not like he was running from something, but toward it. By the time Liam Harper reached the end of the narrow mountain road, night had already swallowed the horizon. The world outside was a blur of white and shadow, snow tumbling in thick, slow spirals, the last light of day fading behind the ridge. His truck groaned as it climbed the final stretch, tires crunching over frozen earth. The wind pressed against the cab like an animal trying to get in. Ranger sat upright in the passenger seat, silent but alert. His breath fogged the window with every exhale, amber eyes following the jagged outlines of the trees that framed the road like dark sentinels. When the headlights finally caught the shape of the cabin, a squat silhouette against the storm, the dog's ears pricked, his body going still. There it is, Liam murmured, his voice low, steady. Home for now. He turned the engine off. The sudden silence was almost jarring. Only the whisper of snow against metal and the faint creak of cooling steel remained. For a long moment, neither man nor dog moved. Then Liam reached for the door handle, the cold air rushing in like a living thing. The cabin loomed ahead, small, rough, its log walls silvered with age and frost. A narrow porch sagged under years of neglect, and the chimney rose crookedly, a dark gash against the pale sky. The place looked abandoned, but not forgotten. It had that strange presence of somewhere that had been waiting too long to be remembered. Ranger jumped out first, landing softly in the snow. He sniffed the air, every muscle taut, as if reading the invisible stories the wind carried. Liam followed, boots sinking into the powdery white. He took a slow breath. The air was sharp and clean, but beneath it lingered a faint metallic tang, like rusted nails and rain-soaked stone. The front door resisted him at first, swollen with years of moisture and silence. When it finally gave way, the hinges protested with a moan that echoed through the dark interior. The smell inside hit him. Dust, old wood, the faint trace of cold ashes. It was the scent of a life, interrupted. Liam stepped across the threshold, the floorboards creaking beneath his weight. He reached for his flashlight, its narrow beam cutting through the gloom. The first thing he noticed was the dust. Thick, untouched, except for the delicate patterns of mouse tracks near the baseboards. Every object in the room seemed to tell a fragment of a story. A coat still hung by the door. Wool, heavy, one pocket bulging slightly, as if its owner had meant to return for it. On the table near the window sat a ceramic coffee mug, a faint brown ring dried halfway down the inside. Beside it, a book lay open, its pages curled and brittle, a thin layer of frost glinting along the edges. The bookmark was a folded newspaper clipping, an article about corporate expansion in the region, dated 15 years ago. Liam moved carefully, as though intruding on something sacred. The flashlight glinted off the surface of a metal typewriter on a desk by the wall, its keys stiff with dust. Sheets of paper, yellowed and curling, were scattered around it, fragments of sentences frozen mid-thought. He picked one up, brushing the dirt away with his thumb. The ink had faded, but he could make out a few words. If they find this. He folded it gently and set it back down. Ranger padded silently beside him, nose close to the ground, tail low. The dog's breath was steady, but his movements had grown slower, more deliberate. His head turned sharply every few moments, following sounds that Liam couldn't hear. The groan of old timbers, the sigh of wind through the cracks, the whisper of snow against the roof. The flashlight beam drifted to the far wall, where the hearth dominated the room. It was built from river stones, smooth and rounded, the mortar between them gray with age. Ashes lay cold and untouched within. A few splintered logs collapsed into themselves. Liam crouched beside it, running his hand along the soot-blackened edge. The stones felt colder than they should have, as though the chill had settled into their bones. "We'll get you going again tomorrow," he murmured, more to himself than to the fire. "A little warmth won't hurt." He set down his pack and unrolled his sleeping bag near the far corner, close enough to the hearth to feel whatever heat he might manage later. The cabin groaned softly in the wind, boards flexing like the slow breath of a sleeping animal. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a photograph. His old partner, Jake, standing beside him in uniform, both younger, smiling in the sunlight. The picture was creased, worn at the edges. Liam stared at it for a long time before tucking it away again. The wind outside picked up, rattling the shutters, sending a moan through the chimney that sounded too human to be natural. Ranger's ears twitched. He lifted his head, body tensing. Then, without warning, he let out a deep, resonant growl. Liam turned, flashlight sweeping across the room. What is it? This dog's gaze was locked on the hearth. His fur bristled along his spine, a low rumble vibrating in his chest. Then he stepped forward, muscles coiled, and began pawing at the base of the stone structure. His claws scraped against the mortar, sharp and frantic. Ranger, hey, easy. But the dog didn't stop. His growl deepened, his tail rigid, eyes fixed on something Liam couldn't see. He began clawing harder now, whining in short, tense bursts, as if trying to dig through the very foundation. Liam knelt beside him, pressing a hand to the shepherd's shoulder. The muscles beneath his palm were like coiled wire. What are you trying to tell me, boy? He whispered. Ranger's nose worked furiously against the cracks between the stones. Then, suddenly, he froze, ears back, eyes wide. A low, guttural sound came from deep in his chest, a sound Liam hadn't heard since their years in service together. The sound Ranger made when something hidden and dangerous was close. Liam leaned closer to the hearth, the beam of his flashlight sweeping across the stones. At first, he saw nothing but soot and dust. Then he felt it, faint, almost imperceptible, a subtle warmth radiating from the center of the hearth. He frowned, pressing his gloved hand against it again. The warmth was real. The fire hadn't been lit in years, yet something beneath the stone still held heat, a faint pulse like the heartbeat of the house itself. A gust of wind slammed against the cabin then, the walls trembling under its force. The shutters banged open, letting in a swirl of snow. The fireless hearth seemed to breathe, a faint hiss escaping from the cracks, as if the stones themselves were exhaling. Ranger barked once, sharp and loud, cutting through the roar of the storm. The sound echoed strangely, bouncing off the log walls, swallowed by the moan of the wind. Liam stayed crouched by the hearth, eyes narrowed, the beam of his flashlight tracing the uneven mortar. The warmth beneath his fingers seemed to fade and return, like something alive shifting just out of sight. He looked down at his dog, loyal, trembling, unblinking, and for the first time since stepping into the cabin, he felt the faint prickle of unease slide down his spine. Outside, the storm howled with renewed fury, beating against the windows as though trying to warn them away. Liam whispered again, softer now, his voice barely a breath against the sound of the wind. What are you trying to tell me, boy? The dog didn't move. His gaze stayed locked on the stones, and beneath them, somewhere deep and unseen, something waited. Morning came reluctantly to the hollow. The storm had passed, but its memory still lingered. Drifts of snow banked high against the walls, the air sharp with the metallic chill of melted frost. Thin bands of gray light filtered through the broken shutters, cutting across the cabin's dim interior like pale blades. The world outside was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that made every sound inside the cabin feel amplified. The crack of the floorboard beneath Liam's boots, the soft, rhythmic breath of Ranger lying near the door. Liam hadn't slept much. He'd lain awake most of the night listening to the wind die away, his thoughts circling back to that strange heat pulsing behind the hearth. It didn't make sense. No power, no fire, no logical explanation. But logic rarely won when instinct spoke, and Ranger's reaction had told him more than words ever could. Now, as the dawn pressed weakly against the windows, Liam stood facing the fireplace once more. The stones were mottled with soot, their dark surfaces catching the dull morning light. He crouched down and placed a hand on the hearth's center. The faint warmth he'd felt the night before was gone, replaced by the solid chill of old stone. But the memory of it, that fleeting heat, refused to fade. He grabbed his toolbox from the corner and pulled out a crowbar, the steel cold and heavy in his hand. Ranger rose silently, padding over to sit at his side, his head tilted as if sensing what was about to happen. Liam gave a small nod, half to himself, half to the dog. "Let's see what you were trying to tell me, partner." He slid the tip of the crowbar into the thin crack between the central stone and the ones surrounding it. The metal scraped, shrieking softly against the hardened mortar. He pushed, twisting his wrist, testing the seam. At first, the stone held firm, refusing to move. Then, a faint, hollow sound. A space beneath. Liam paused. His breath fogged the cold air. Ranger gave a low, restless whine. "You hear that too, don't you?" Liam muttered, repositioning the bar for better leverage. He pressed harder, his muscles tightening. The stone shifted slightly, a grainy crumble of mortar falling to the floor. Another push, harder this time. The edge began to lift, just barely, but enough to see what lay beneath. A stale, dry smell rose from the crack, something ancient, sealed away from the air for years. Liam wedged the crowbar deeper and pried again. The stone groaned, then gave way with a dull, heavy sound that reverberated through the wooden floor. He dragged the slab aside, breath quickening as a dark hollow revealed itself. The compartment wasn't large, maybe 4 feet long, 2 feet deep, its walls lined with stone and clay. But what lay inside stole the breath from his lungs. There was a metal box, olive green, military issue, the kind used for ammunition or classified storage. Its surface was layered with dust, but still sturdy. Beside it, several thick journals sat bound in cracked leather, their pages yellowed but intact, tied together with a strip of brittle twine. Liam reached down, his gloved fingers brushing the cool metal of the box. He lifted it carefully, setting it on the hearth. Ranger stayed close, his tail sweeping the floor once in a slow arc. The dog's amber eyes followed every movement with quiet intensity, as if he knew that what they were uncovering was more than just forgotten things. It was something dangerous, something forbidden. The latch on the box resisted for a moment before snapping open with a sharp click. The sound echoed unnaturally loud in the still cabin. Liam hesitated, then lifted the lid. Inside was an orderly collection of objects, items arranged with purpose, the work of someone meticulous, someone who knew their time might run out. On top lay several manila envelopes filled with documents, corners brittle with age. Beneath them, a series of small glass vials, each sealed with wax and labeled in precise handwriting. Sample 14B, Creek Water, North Ridge. Sample 22A, Runoff, Quarry Basin. The liquid inside each vial was dark, almost black, with a faint oily sheen that caught the light. Liam swallowed hard. He reached for the stack of papers. The first was a typed report stamped with the letterhead of an independent lab in Atlanta, dated 2008. He scanned the columns of numbers and chemical names: arsenic, lead, industrial solvents. The results were clear: levels unsafe for human or animal consumption. Another sheet bore Ethan Holt's name, his signature scrawled across the bottom. Handwritten notes filled the margins: coordinates, creek names, brief observations like children in town complaining of rashes, and county officials ignoring samples. Liam's fingers tightened on the page. His chest felt heavy. The truth unfolded slowly, piece by piece, until it formed something undeniable. Ethan Holt hadn't been paranoid. He'd been right. The red-circled map that followed confirmed it. A topographic survey of the valley, certain areas marked with annotations. The circles followed the rivers and creeks leading away from the old Marrow Industries mining site. Holt had been tracking contamination, proof that the company's waste was seeping into the valley's water supply. and someone had silenced him for it. Liam sat back on his heels, staring at the evidence spread before him. The cold air pressed close, but a slow heat began to rise from within. Not the mysterious warmth of the hearth this time, but something deeper. Anger, respect, purpose. He glanced toward the journals. The first one's leather cover was stiff, but the pages inside were surprisingly well preserved. Holt's handwriting was small, tight, each line written with the precision of a man documenting a war no one else could see. The entries began simply. September 12th. Found residue near stream bed. Locals think it's mineral dust, but I know better. Then they darkened. October 8th. They came to the cabin last night. Said it was a safety inspection. Sheriff with them. They weren't checking codes. They were looking for my notes. The last page ended mid-sentence. If I don't make it. The line broke off, the pen stroke trailing down the Saskatchewan page. Liam exhaled slowly, the weight of the discovery pressing against his chest. He looked at Ranger, who was sitting now, perfectly still, head tilted slightly as if waiting for his reaction. He didn't run, Liam said quietly, the words catching in his throat. He didn't die by accident. They killed him to keep this buried. Ranger blinked, his gaze softening. He took a step forward and rested his muzzle gently on Liam's knee. The simple gesture, so instinctive, so pure, cut through the cold like a spark of warmth. Liam placed a hand on the dog's head, fingers curling into the thick fur behind his ears. He didn't die in vain, boy, he whispered. Not if we finish what he started. For a long moment, neither moved. The light from the window shifted, catching the glass vials inside the box and scattering tiny reflections across the cabin walls. Fragments of light, glimmering like ghosts, come to witness the truth finally being unearthed. Outside, the wind had picked up again, rustling through the pines. It no longer sounded like warning, but something else. Approval, perhaps. The hollow itself seemed to exhale, its long-held secret finally breaking the surface. Liam closed the box gently, sealing it again with care. Ranger stayed pressed close to him, his amber eyes calm now, his earlier tension replaced by a deep, almost reverent stillness. For the first time since arriving, the cabin didn't feel hostile. It felt awake, as though the spirit of Ethan Holt still lingered there, waiting for someone to listen. Liam rose slowly, his hand still resting on Ranger's head. "We'll see this through," he said softly. "For him. For everyone." Outside, the light brightened slightly, scattering through the cracks of the shutters. The storm's scars remained, but the silence had changed. It no longer felt empty. It felt like a promise. The snow had softened by afternoon, falling in thick, lazy flakes that drifted like ashes from an unseen fire. The air carried that strange stillness that comes after a storm, a deceptive calm, as if the land itself was holding its breath. The hollow looked almost peaceful in that light, but Liam Harper had lived long enough to know that silence often came before the next kind of trouble. He was kneeling beside the hearth, studying the hidden compartment he had resealed at dawn. The metal box now sat locked inside his duffel bag, tucked beneath a layer of clothing. Every so often, his eyes flicked toward it, not out of fear, but out of a quiet, steady promise. The truth was now his burden to carry. Ranger lay near the door, chin resting on his paws, watching his master with the calm focus of an animal that understood more than he should. Every crackle of the cabin's timbers, every sigh of the wind made the shepherd's ears twitch. A faint sound, tires crunching over frozen snow, cut through the quiet. Ranger's head lifted, his body stiffened. Liam straightened slowly. He set the crowbar aside, wiping his hands on his jeans. Through the window, he could see the vague shape of a dark SUV moving up the narrow road, its headlights muted in the pale afternoon haze. Ranger gave a low growl. Not loud, just a sound from deep in his chest. "Easy," Liam murmured. "Let's see who thinks we're worth visiting today." The vehicle came to a stop a few yards from the porch. The driver's door opened, and a figure stepped out. Heavy coat, hat pulled low, boots crunching through the snow. Even before the face came into view, Liam knew the gait. Measured. Confident. Sheriff Clay Morgan. It had been years since Liam last saw him, back when they both wore badges and still believed justice could be clean. Back before Clay had chosen politics over principle, and before Liam had walked away for good. The sheriff approached the cabin with a small, practiced smile that never quite reached his eyes. He tapped on the doorframe with a gloved hand. "Heard someone finally bought the Holt place," he said, voice warm, easy. "Should have guessed it'd be you, Harper. Always did have a taste for trouble." Liam opened the door halfway, one hand resting on it, the other loose by his side. "Afternoon, Clay. Mind if I step in?" Liam hesitated a fraction too long. Then, "Sure, you're already here." Clay brushed snow from his coat as he stepped inside. The cabin was small, and his presence filled it in an instant. He glanced around with casual curiosity, the kind of look that was meant to appear harmless but measured everything it touched. "Nice place," Clay said, though the sarcasm was thinly veiled. His eyes flicked to the hearth, lingered for just a moment too long, then continued their lazy sweep around the room. "Heard you picked it up for next to nothing. Guess the old ghosts don't scare you much, huh?" "I've met worse than ghosts." Clay chuckled, the sound low. "That you have." Ranger moved closer, silent but steady, positioning himself between Liam and the sheriff. His posture wasn't threatening, just deliberate. Clay noticed. "Still got the same dog, huh?" he said. "What's his name again? Reaper?" "Ranger." "Right." Clay crouched slightly, extending a gloved hand. "He friendly?" "Depends," Liam said flatly, "on who he's looking at." The sheriff's hand paused mid-air. He straightened with a smile that didn't quite hide his irritation. "Always did like your sense of humor." He took a few idle steps around the room, glancing at the walls, the floorboards, the shelves where Liam had stacked a few supplies. His tone stayed polite, but there was something calculated beneath it. "You planning on staying long?" "Haven't decided." "Well," Clay said, brushing at an invisible speck on his sleeve. "It's a quiet town. Folks around here like to keep it that way. Holt stirred up a lot of noise before he disappeared. Be ashamed to see someone else dig up old dirt." Liam met his gaze evenly. "If the dirt's clean, it shouldn't matter who digs it." The smile faltered. Just a flicker, but enough. "You always did have a way of making things complicated, Harper. Sometimes letting sleeping dogs lie is the wiser path." Liam looked down at Ranger, whose ears had flattened slightly. "Problem is," he said, "sleeping dogs wake up when there's danger nearby." For a moment, the only sound was the faint hiss of wind slipping through the cracks in the walls. Then Clay exhaled, forced a laugh, and stepped toward the door. "You know, I almost missed that mouth of yours." As he turned, his glove slipped slightly, revealing a flash of skin at his wrist, a pale line of scar tissue, thin but unmistakable. Liam froze. The memory hit sharp and immediate. Years ago, the Birmingham investigation, the warehouse fire, the officer who'd covered up a bribe for a mining executive. The man had grabbed a burning beam bare-handed, trying to destroy evidence, and walked away with that same crescent scar on his wrist. Liam's voice dropped to a near whisper. You were there. Clay's movement stilled. He adjusted his gloves slowly, deliberately. When he spoke again, his tone was calm, almost pitying. Careful, Liam. You start connecting too many dots, and pretty soon the picture doesn't just haunt you, it eats you. Liam stepped closer, close enough to see the flicker in the other man's eyes. Holt didn't disappear because of ghosts, did he? Clay smiled thinly. Ghosts, greed, guilt, take your pick. Either way, you're not the first man to think he could save this place. Ranger gave a low, warning growl. Clay's eyes drifted down. You might want to keep that one on a leash, Harper. Out here, accidents happen easy in the snow. Yeah, Liam said quietly. I remember. The sheriff reached for the door. Well, I should be going. Roads'll freeze up soon. Wouldn't want to get stuck out here overnight. He glanced back once more, eyes cold now beneath the mask of civility. Stay warm, Liam, and stay out of the Hollow's business. The door shut behind him with a soft click. For a long time, Liam didn't move. The only sound was Ranger's breathing, steady, reassuring. Then, slowly, he crossed to the window and watched as the sheriff's SUV reversed down the narrow path, snow spraying from its tires until it disappeared behind the trees. When the sound of the engine faded, he turned away, tension still coiled in his chest. Ranger whined softly, stepping closer, head pressing gently against Liam's thigh. Yeah, Liam murmured. I saw it too. He grabbed his coat and stepped outside. The afternoon light was fading into the blue-gray of evening. The cold bit hard, sharp, and deliberate. He walked toward the truck, snow crunching underfoot. At first, everything looked normal, until he crouched near the front tire. There it was, a small, clean puncture, almost surgical in its precision. A warning. Liam stood slowly, staring out at the empty road. The snow kept falling, soft and soundless, covering the tracks Clay's SUV had left behind. He looked down at Ranger. The shepherd met his gaze, tail motionless, eyes full of that same unspoken understanding they'd shared through countless battles before. Liam's jaw tightened. Old friends don't leave scars, he said quietly. They just remind you where you got them. The dog gave a faint huff of breath, the kind that wasn't quite a growl, but not comfort either. It was agreement. Inside the cabin, the fireless hearth waited, its secrets sealed beneath stone once more. But the real fire, the one burning in Liam's chest, had just been reignited. And he knew as the wind rose again through the valley that the Hollow had just chosen sides. By morning, the storm had lost its voice. The snow that blanketed the valley was pristine, a smooth, unbroken field of white, reflecting the fragile sunlight like shards of glass. For the first time in days, Liam Harper could see the line of mountains in the distance, their jagged edges carving shadows across the horizon. The silence was deceptive, the kind that made a man listen harder, as if the world were holding its breath for what came next. Liam stepped out onto the porch, coffee mug steaming in his hand, the cold biting through the flannel on his sleeves. Ranger was already awake, padding through the snow near the edge of the clearing, nose low, tail stiff. His instincts hadn't relaxed since the sheriff's visit. Liam couldn't shake the image of that punctured tire, that small, precise wound left behind like a signature. The message was clear. We're watching. He looked toward the mountains again, the pale light shifting. For a fleeting moment, everything seemed almost peaceful. Then the distant hum of an engine reached his ears. Deep, powerful. Not the kind of sound that belonged to a farm truck or a snowplow. Ranger's head snapped up. His ears twitched, and a low growl rumbled in his chest. Yeah, Liam muttered, setting down the mug. I hear it too. The black truck appeared moments later, cresting the ridge in a shimmer of sunlight and exhaust. It was a machine built for show. Gleaming chrome, tires meant for city streets rather than mountain trails. As it pulled into the clearing, the sound of its engine cut through the still air like a blade. The driver's door opened with the precision of a stage cue. Victor Marrow stepped out. He looked almost absurd against the rugged wilderness, all clean lines and tailored wool, the kind of man who wore money like armor. His coat was jet black, his gloves soft leather, his shoes somehow untouched by the snow. His smile was polite, measured, practiced, the kind of smile that had probably sealed 1,000 deals and buried twice as many truths. "Mr. Harper," he called out, his tone warm but unmistakably commanding. "I hope I'm not intruding." Liam stood by the porch railing, saying nothing. Ranger moved quietly to his side, shoulders squared, gaze fixed on the stranger. Marrow closed the truck door and walked closer, his steps deliberate. "You've picked quite the piece of land," he said. "Beautiful, isn't it? Untouched. Almost sacred." "Depends who you ask," Liam replied. Marrow's eyes flicked briefly toward the cabin. "Oh, I've heard the stories. Ghosts, curses, disappearances. Small towns love their legends." He smiled wider. "But I'm not a man who believes in ghosts. I believe in opportunity." Liam crossed his arms. "That right?" "Indeed." Marrow reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope, thick, neatly sealed. He handed it over like a man offering a gift rather than a bribe. $80,000, cash. You sign the deed over today, and we both walk away richer. No fuss, no lawyers. Liam didn't take the envelope. He let the silence stretch instead, watching the man's perfectly rehearsed confidence flicker for half a heartbeat. Marrow chuckled lightly, lowering the envelope but keeping it visible. "Look, I understand what it's like to want a fresh start. You've seen too much, haven't you? A good man like you deserves peace, not trouble. This place," he gestured toward the cabin, "it's nothing but rot and rumor. Take the money. Start over somewhere warm." Liam's voice was calm. "You came all the way out here in a snowstorm to save me from bad real estate?" Marrow's smile didn't falter, but the edge in his tone sharpened. "Let's not pretend, Mr. Harper. You found something, and whatever it is, it's not yours to keep." Ranger's growl deepened. The sound was low but primal, resonant in the cold air. Marrow's eyes flicked toward the dog, a flash of genuine unease breaking through his polished exterior. "Easy, boy," Liam murmured, his hand resting lightly on Ranger's neck. The dog didn't move, didn't blink. He just watched. Marrow's composure slipped for a fraction of a second, the corner of his mouth twitching, the faint tightening of his jaw. Then he forced a laugh, stepping back half a pace. "I see why you keep him around. Loyal creatures, German shepherds, too loyal sometimes." Liam's gaze didn't waver. "You'd know something about loyalty, wouldn't you?" Marrow tilted his head, studying him. "Meaning?" "Meaning," Liam said, voice low and steady. "You expect everyone to stay silent, like Holt did." The name landed like a bullet between them. For the first time, Victor Marrow's mask cracked. His eyes narrowed, the false warmth draining from his face. "You should be careful throwing names around you don't understand," he said softly. Ethan Holt was a disturbed man. He saw conspiracies where there were none. "Funny," Liam replied. "He left evidence saying otherwise. Reports, samples, maps." A pause, just long enough to confirm that Liam had hit the mark. Marrow exhaled slowly, forcing his composure back into place. "You really have no idea what you're standing on, do you, officer?" Liam's expression hardened. Neither did you when you killed Holt. Silence. The words hung between them, sharp and heavy, like frost in the air. For several heartbeats, Marrow didn't move. The wind picked up, tugging at his coat, scattering snow across the clearing. Then, a smile. Small, deliberate, chilling. Careful what you dig for, Mr. Harper, he said quietly. Sometimes, the ground gives way beneath you. He turned, walking back to his truck with the same measured stride, as if every step had been choreographed. When he reached the door, he paused, glancing back once. Enjoy your little cabin, but take my advice. Don't stay too long. Some places, don't let go easily. The engine roared to life, tires spitting snow as the black truck reversed down the narrow road. Within seconds, the sound faded, swallowed by the mountains. Liam stood still, the cold biting through his coat, the wind cutting against his face. Ranger pressed against his leg, his body tense, the fur along his spine standing on end. Yeah, Liam muttered, his gaze fixed on the disappearing trail of tire tracks. I saw it too. That wasn't a visit. It was a warning. The first snowflake of the new storm landed on the back of his hand, then another. Within minutes, the sky had turned from silver to slate, the light bleeding away as the clouds rolled in once more. Ranger gave a low whine, shifting uneasily. Liam knelt beside him, running a hand through his fur. Looks like we've stirred the hornet's nest, partner, he said softly. But we're not running, not this time. The wind rose, rattling the shutters, sweeping across the valley like a whispering voice. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled. Not the thunder of weather, but the kind that felt like an omen. The hollow, for all its silence, had begun to awaken. And as the storm gathered once again over the mountains, Liam Harper stood on the porch, watching the first flakes fall, knowing the next fight was already on its way. The wind outside had turned into a living thing, shrieking, clawing, slamming its icy fists against the cabin walls. Snow lashed at the windows like 1,000 small ghosts trying to get in. Midnight had erased the world beyond the firelight, leaving only the sound of the blizzard and the fragile flicker of a lantern that swayed with every gust. Liam Harper sat hunched over the small wooden table, writing by hand. Notes, coordinates, fragments from Ethan Holt's journals. Anything that might later serve as evidence if he didn't make it through the night. His handwriting was tight and deliberate, his thoughts sharper than the wind howling outside. Ranger lay near the fire, his body curled but alert even in sleep, one ear always cocked toward the door. The shepherd's slow, steady breathing was the only thing keeping the silence human. For hours, Liam had tried to convince himself that the storm would keep everyone away, even men like Victor Marrow. But deep down, he knew better. Money and power didn't fear weather. They didn't fear much of anything, except the truth. The blizzard screamed again, rattling the shutters. Liam paused, listening. Something about the sound had changed. Beneath the storm's roar, another rhythm, faint, deliberate, a crunch of snow, measured and slow. Ranger's head lifted, his ears stood erect, his eyes opened, gleaming amber in the lamplight. Liam didn't move. He held his breath, listening. Another sound. Closer now. The soft scrape of boots against the porch. He set the pen down and reached instinctively for the rifle propped against the wall. The weight of it was familiar, grounding, like shaking hands with an old friend before a fight. Then came the clang. The padlock on the front door rattled once, twice, a metallic scream swallowed by the wind. Ranger was on his feet instantly, muscles coiled, fur bristling. His low growl vibrated through the floorboards. Ranger, Liam whispered, his voice a thread of steel in the dark. Quiet. He turned down the lamp, then killed it completely. The light vanished, plunging the room into darkness save for the faint red glow of dying embers in the hearth. The storm outside howled louder, as if sensing the violence about to unfold within. The lock rattled again, then snapped. The door creaked open just a fraction, the wind screaming through the gap. And in that narrow sliver of blackness, Liam saw it, the faint gleam of a gun barrel catching the moonlight. Everything inside him went still. Then chaos erupted. The door burst open, snow and shadows crashing into the room. Ranger launched forward, a blur of silver and muscle, hitting the first intruder square in the chest. A man's scream tore through the blizzard's roar, high and raw. The sound of shock and pain as the dog's weight drove him backward. Gunfire exploded, deafening, blinding. Shattered glass sprayed from the window, glittering like ice shards in the dark. Liam dropped behind the table, shouldering the rifle. He fired once. A warning shot. Low, deliberate, just enough to make the second man dive for cover. The flash illuminated everything for a heartbeat. Ranger tangled with a figure in black, the man's gloved hands clawing at the dog's fur, a knife flashing once before disappearing into the shadows. Liam fired again, hitting the doorframe inches from the intruder's shoulder. "Drop it!" he shouted. The man didn't. Ranger's growl turned into a feral snarl, deep and primal. There was another scream, then silence, broken only by the wind shrieking through the open door. The second attacker fired blindly, the bullet whistling past Liam's ear and burying itself in the wall. Liam rolled, came up on one knee, and fired back. His shot struck the man's shoulder, spinning him sideways. The figure stumbled into the doorway, clutching his arm, then bolted into the storm, swallowed by the white madness beyond. The silence that followed was deafening. Liam's breath came in ragged bursts, clouds of vapor filling the cold air. The rifle trembled slightly in his hands, not from fear, but from the adrenaline still burning through his veins. Then he heard it, a soft whine. "Ranger?" He turned, scanning the dim light. The dog stood near the fallen intruder, chest heaving, muzzle dark with blood. Liam's heart lurched, but then he saw it wasn't Ranger's blood. The shepherd's amber eyes met his, steady and alive. Liam crossed the room, kicking the man's weapon away. The intruder lay half-conscious, bleeding from a deep wound across his arm and side. His face was masked, but the shape of the scar above his ear, a long, pale crescent, struck Liam like a memory. He'd seen that mark before, years ago, on one of Marrow's private security men who had handled inconvenient witnesses during the Birmingham inquiry. "You picked the wrong house," Liam said quietly. The man groaned, muttering something unintelligible. Liam didn't bother to listen. He pressed the barrel of his rifle against the man's shoulder, just enough to make him flinch. "Tell your boss," he said, voice low and lethal. "Next time he better bring more than ghosts." The man didn't answer. His eyes rolled back and he slumped into the snow that had drifted through the open door. Ranger limped closer, his breath fast but even. Liam knelt beside him, running his hands through the thick fur. The blood matted on the shepherd's neck wasn't his, just the intruder's, but the sight of it still twisted something deep in Liam's chest. "Good boy," he whispered hoarsely. "Good boy." Ranger's head tilted, his tail giving a faint, uncertain wag. His fur was damp from melted snow, his body trembling slightly from exhaustion. Liam's throat tightened as he realized just how close it had been. He sank down beside him, one hand gripping the dog's collar, the other trembling slightly against the rifle. Outside, the storm raged louder, as if mocking their fragile survival. The cabin smelled of gunpowder, blood, and smoke. The table lay overturned, papers scattered, glass crunching underfoot. The body by the door was still. Ranger shifted, pressing his head against Liam's knee. His eyes were steady, loyal, unyielding, the same eyes that had once faced gunfire beside him in foreign lands. Liam swallowed hard. His voice cracked when he finally spoke. "You're my last partner left," he said softly, barely a whisper. "The only one who never walked away." Ranger let out a low, tired sigh, curling closer against him. For a long time, Liam stayed like that, one hand resting on the dog's head, the other clutching the rifle across his lap. The storm screamed outside, battering the cabin walls, but inside, everything felt suspended. Two survivors caught in the fragile silence between violence and consequence. He closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the steady rise and fall of Ranger's breathing beneath his palm. The warmth there was real, alive, and somehow stronger than the cold around them. When he opened them again, the snow had begun to drift through the broken window, settling over the fallen man's boots. Liam reached out, dragging the body outside into the storm, not out of mercy but necessity. He shut the door, reinforced it with a wooden beam, and turned back to Ranger. "Rest," he murmured. "We'll need our strength." The dog obeyed, lowering his head onto his paws, eyes half closed. Liam stood at the window, staring into the blizzard. He couldn't see anything, not the trees, not the road, not the line between earth and sky. But he knew the storm wasn't done. Not yet. The world before dawn was painted in shades of gray, the kind of colorless quiet that lives between night and morning, when time itself seems to hold its breath. The storm had passed hours ago, leaving behind a white silence that stretched endlessly in every direction. The snow outside lay smooth and unbroken, as if the violence of the night before had never happened. But inside the cabin, the air still carried the ghost of gunpowder. Liam Harper sat at the small table, a blanket draped around his shoulders, the rifle laid across his lap. The lantern flickered weakly beside him, its flame barely alive. Across from him, Ranger slept near the door, his body coiled and his breathing deep but watchful, the kind of rest that never truly let go. Every so often, the shepherd's ears twitched, reacting to some sound Liam couldn't hear. On the floor lay the remnants of the previous battle, a shattered chair, streaks of melted snow, and one dark stain that no amount of scrubbing could erase. The blood wasn't his, but it didn't matter. It was still part of the cabin now, part of the truth this place refused to bury. Liam rubbed his tired eyes. The clock on the wall ticked softly. 4:13 a.m. He knew they'd come again. Not tonight, maybe, but soon. Victor Marrow wouldn't let a witness live, not when the truth he carried could destroy everything the man had built. Liam exhaled slowly and reached into his jacket. From an inner pocket, he pulled out a small plastic bag containing a prepaid burner phone, one of the kind you could buy for cash at a gas station, no questions asked. He tore open the package, inserted the battery, and powered it on. The tiny screen glowed in the darkness, casting a faint blue light across his face. The signal bars appeared, weak but alive. "All right," he murmured, his voice low and steady. "Let's do this." He opened the duffel bag on the floor, pulling out a stack of files, Holt's reports, the chemical test results, the maps marked in red. He laid them out neatly on the table, then took a flash drive from his coat. It was small, nondescript, but inside it held everything: photos, scans, voice notes, proof of industrial poisoning, proof of murder. Ranger stirred, lifting his head slightly. His eyes, still heavy with exhaustion, found Liam's face. "It's okay, boy," Liam whispered, "just sending a message. One last one." He connected the flash drive to the phone using a small adapter. The device blinked once, then began uploading. The progress bar crawled forward, pixel by pixel. Each second felt like a lifetime. Outside, the wind sighed through the trees, brushing against the cabin like a whisper of warning. When the upload finished, Liam opened the messaging app, a secure one, encrypted end to end. He typed a familiar address into the recipient field. Maria Jensen. He hadn't spoken to her in nearly 3 years. The last time they'd seen each other, it was in a desert halfway across the world. An evacuation gone wrong, an ambush, and a moment that still burned behind his eyelids every time he closed them. She'd been a young journalist then, fearless, reckless, and brilliant. He'd saved her life, and in doing so had trusted her with something even greater, his belief that truth still mattered. Now that belief was all he had left to give. He typed slowly, carefully, each word deliberate. Maria, if you're reading this, it means I've run out of time. What I'm sending you is everything Ethan Holt died for. The proof of what Marrow Industries has done to this valley and the people in it. These documents are real. Don't trust local law enforcement. They're compromised. If I don't check in by 0600, you take this to the FBI in Denver. Use the passphrase, Iron Hollow. They'll understand. I know what I'm asking. But you're the only one I trust to finish what we started. LH. He paused, reading the message twice, then pressed send. The file began to transfer, the progress circle spinning endlessly. He watched it like a man watching a candle burn down to its last drop of wax. When the confirmation came through, Liam felt a small, fragile peace settle in his chest. The truth was no longer trapped here. Even if he fell, it would live on, passed into hands that would make sure the world saw it. He sat back in the chair, staring at the phone screen. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then, quietly, he whispered, "It's yours now, Maria. Don't let it die." The glow from the phone cast long shadows across the walls. Then, without hesitation, he turned it off, pulled the battery out, and dropped both pieces into the cold, blackened fireplace. He struck a match and let it fall. The flame caught instantly, devouring the plastic, curling it inward, until it melted into ash. The smell of burning metal and plastic filled the room. Harsh, acrid, but strangely cleansing. When it was done, Liam sat in silence again. He reached for his rifle, checking the chamber, then reloaded it with mechanical precision. Each click echoed softly, like a heartbeat. He'd done this motion 1,000 times before, but tonight it carried a different weight. He set the weapon on the table, next to the coffee mug that had long since gone cold. The air felt thicker now, not with fear, but with inevitability. Ranger rose from his spot near the door and padded over, his nails clicking gently on the wood. He stopped beside Liam, his head level with his shoulder. Without a sound, he rested it there, leaning gently against the man's arm. Liam turned his head slightly, his cheek brushing against the shepherd's fur. It was warm, soft, alive, an anchor against the tide of uncertainty pressing against the walls. For a long time, neither of them moved. The clock ticked toward 5. The first light of dawn began to leak through the cracks in the shutters, turning the gray air a faint, watery blue. "You've done enough, partner," Liam murmured. "Whatever happens next, we stand our ground. Together." Ranger exhaled softly, a sound between a sigh and a hum, and closed his eyes. His tail gave a single slow wag. Liam reached out and placed his hand on the dog's head. His voice came low, steady, filled with something almost like prayer. "We've both seen hell before. One more won't make a difference." Outside, a distant rumble broke the silence, the faint echo of an engine carried on the wind. Liam didn't flinch. He simply looked toward the door, then at the rifle resting on the table. The faint glow of dawn painted his face in pale silver. "Showtime," he whispered. Ranger's ears twitched, his muscles tightening beneath the fur. Liam rose, slinging the rifle across his shoulder, and took one last look around the cabin. At the shattered window, the half-burned phone, the silent hearth that held a secret the world would soon uncover. He drew in a breath that felt heavier than air and looked down at the dog beside him. "Stay close, boy," he said. "If we fall, at least they'll know we stood for something." Ranger pressed closer, his head leaning once more against Liam's shoulder. Two soldiers, one human, one hound, sharing the same quiet acceptance before the next battle. Outside, the first snowflakes began to fall again, soft and soundless. The storm was returning, and so was war. The storm had returned with vengeance. By midnight, the world beyond the cabin vanished completely, erased by a white curtain of snow and wind that screamed through the valley like something all. The blizzard battered the roof until it groaned under the strain, every gust howling as though the hollow itself was crying out for what was about to come. Inside, the cabin flickered with weak lantern light. The fire in the hearth had died hours ago, leaving only smoldering embers that pulsed faintly in the dark. Liam Harper moved like a shadow through the small room, checking his rifle, counting rounds. Every click of metal echoed too loudly in the silence. Ranger lay by the door, muscles tense, eyes fixed on the window. He had been restless all night, the kind of restless that spoke of danger long before a man could see it. His ears twitched at every distant sound the wind carried, the shifting of branches, the groan of ice, and something else. Liam froze. There, beneath the howl of the storm, came the faint crunch of footsteps. Slow, measured, too deliberate to be the weather's doing. He moved to the window, extinguished the lamp, and peered through the frost-streaked glass. At first he saw nothing, only snow swirling like white smoke. Then, out of the blinding blur, a flicker of light, another, then another. Flashlights, moving toward the cabin. "They're back," he whispered. Ranger rose instantly, fur bristling. The low growl that rolled from his chest was almost human in its warning. Liam knelt beside him, hand pressing gently against the dog's shoulder. "Steady, boy. We make it count." The lights outside fanned out. 4 figures moving in formation. Then one broke ahead, walking with an easy confidence that sent a chill through Liam, colder than the storm itself. Victor Marrow. Even through the flurries, the man's arrogance was unmistakable. Head held high, steps unhurried, as though the snow and wind bowed to him. He carried no flashlight, only the steady red glow of a cigarette ember that burned like a demon's eye in the dark. Liam's grip on the rifle tightened. "Come out, Mr. Harper!" Marrow's voice rang across the storm, too calm, too smooth. "It's over. Don't make this harder than it has to be." Liam stayed silent. He knew better than to answer. Words were traps. Silence was armor. Then, a sound. The faint clink of glass. Liam's stomach dropped. "Ranger, down!" The window shattered before he finished the word. A Molotov cocktail burst through the air, exploding against the far wall in a violent bloom of fire. Flames roared to life instantly, devouring the dry timber with terrifying hunger. Another followed, then another. The cabin exploded into chaos, orange fire wrestling black smoke while snow raged outside. Heat slammed into Liam's face, the air stung of burning wood and whiskey. Ranger barked, retreating from the spreading flames. Liam threw his coat over the dog. "Stay with me!" The ceiling hissed, melting snow turning to steam. There was no way through the front, surrounded. Liam smashed the back window with his rifle. Glass shattered into the blizzard. "Come on, boy!" He lifted Ranger in his arms and dove into the storm. The cold hit like a hammer. They tumbled into the snow as the cabin behind them burst into an orange tower. A beacon. A warning. A funeral pyre. Shapes emerged from the white. 3 armed men, flashlights slicing through the snow. A shot cracked. Bark splintered beside Liam's head. He fired back, dropping one attacker. Ranger lunged into another. A scream vanished in the wind. Then came the voice, smooth, venomous. "You can't win this, Harper. You're just another ghost in this valley." "Maybe," Liam shouted back, "but ghosts don't forget." Marrow's bullet grazed his shoulder, spinning him to one knee. Ranger charged again. "Ranger, no!" The shepherd lunged. A gunshot thundered, and Ranger stumbled. Red spilled across the snow. "No!" Liam's cry tore through the storm. He fired 3 times. Marrow fell, bleeding and laughing. "You don't know what you've done." "Yeah," Liam rasped. "I do." Before he could finish it, the thump of rotors broke through the blizzard. Searchlights sliced the dark. "This is the FBI. Drop your weapons." Liam didn't move. His eyes locked on Marrow's fear-stricken face. "That's truth catching up," he said softly. He lowered the rifle and ran to Ranger. The dog's breathing was shallow, but there, still alive. "Stay with me, partner." The helicopters circled above, their lights cutting through the storm like dawn breaking open the night. By morning, the storm had passed. The valley lay silent beneath gold-tinted snow. The cabin was gone, replaced by smoldering ruins. Only the stone hearth remained, blackened but unbroken. Liam knelt beside Ranger, who lay wrapped in a blanket, chest rising weakly. Liam pressed a hand to his side, feeling a fragile heartbeat. The radio on his vest crackled. "We got your message, Liam," came a voice. "Maria Jensen. The evidence came through clean. The FBI's taking Marrow and his men." "You did it." Liam whispered. "Not me." Ranger's eyes fluttered open, faint but bright with the same loyalty that had carried them through deserts and gunfights. "You saved the truth," Liam murmured. "You saved me." Ranger gave a weak thump of his tail before drifting to sleep. Agents moved quietly through the wreckage, paramedics tending the wounded. Maria's voice came again. "Hold on, Liam. We're coming to you." He didn't answer. The truth was free now. The Hollow's curse was broken. As the first sunlight breached the clouds, the creek below shimmered, clear for the first time in years. "Looks like the Hollow's breathing again," Liam whispered. Ranger stirred as if agreeing. Spring came softly that year. Snow melted into streams, carrying the soot away. Grass pushed through thawing ground. The valley began to heal. Liam stood where the cabin once stood, the air smelling of pine and wet earth. Behind him rose a new structure, smaller, stronger. The old hearth stood at its heart, untouched, keeper of the past. On the porch, Ranger lay stretched in the sun, muzzle silvered with age. His eyes followed Liam's every move, a soldier at peace. "Guess we made it," Liam said, setting down a plank of wood. Ranger's tail tapped twice. "Yeah, I know. You did most of it." Tires crunched on the dirt road. Maria Jensen appeared, jeans and windbreaker, hair tied back. "Looks like you've been busy," she said. "Couldn't let the ghosts have all the space." She smiled at Ranger. "How's he doing?" "Tougher than both of us." The shepherd raised his head as proof. "They're all gone," Maria said. "Marrow, Clay, the EPA's already cleaning up." "I heard." "You could have come back," she said gently. "Told your side." Liam smiled faintly. "That's your job." She laughed. "Still stubborn." The wind whispered through the pines. "What now, Liam?" He looked toward the horizon, sunlight glinting off the last of the snow. "We stay. Some ghosts deserve to rest." Maria studied him, then nodded. "You sound like a man who finally found peace." Liam's gaze drifted to Ranger, basking in the light. "Maybe I did. Or maybe peace found us." She turned toward her car. "Take care, Harper." "You too, Jensen. Keep telling the truth." As her car disappeared down the road, Liam stood listening to the creek, its water running clean again. He sat beside Ranger on the porch. The dog rested his head on Liam's leg, eyes closing. The valley spread before them, green now, vibrant, its scars fading under time's quiet mercy. "We did it, partner," Liam whispered. The wind stirred the grass. The creek's song carried through the valley, no longer poisoned, only alive. As the sun dipped low, its light turned the stream to gold. The camera would rise slowly then, showing the cabin, the man, and the dog, two small figures in a reborn land. The creek shimmered as it wound through the hollow, singing of life, forgiveness, and ghosts finally at rest. And in that stillness, the valley no longer whispered of tragedy. It whispered of peace. Sometimes, stories like Liam and Ranger's remind us that courage isn't just found in battlefields or headlines. It's in the quiet, steadfast loyalty of a dog who never gives up on his person. German shepherds, especially, have that rare kind of love, strong, patient, and pure. They don't just protect us, they believe in us, even when we've stopped believing in ourselves. If you've ever looked into your dog's eyes and felt that unspoken bond, the trust, the history, the shared silence, you already know what I mean. That connection is something worth deepening, nurturing, and honoring every day. If you'd like, there's a wonderful little resource I've found that helps people understand their dogs better, their moods, their instincts, their way of communicating love. You can check it out when you have a quiet moment. No rush, no pressure. Just something that might help you and your four-legged friend grow even closer. After all, love like that doesn't come often in life. When it does, it deserves to be cherished and kept forever.